fam, and welcome to another episode of the Prescription for Better Living podcast, where our goal is to discuss all things health and wellness in a hip and relatable way so that our community can live healthy, happy, and long lives. Again, I'm Dr. Hernando Carter, board certified internal medicine physician. Yes, I'm still your primary care extraordinaire. And welcome to episode 24 of the Prescription for Better Living podcast. Yep, it has been 24 consecutive weeks of the Prescription for Better Living podcast. And that is, I think, a phenomenal accomplishment. Have you done anything other than, the necessities of life, like work and, live, 24 weeks in a row, anything that you weren't really obligated to do? I'm proud of myself for having done that. And I'm proud of the journey that we've taken all the way from episode 1 all the way up until episode 24. And I think that each episode, each week has offered you value and offered you some nuggets. If you agree with me, you know what I need you to do. I need you to share this podcast. I need you to like the video. I need you to comment on the video. I need you to stand on the tallest mountaintop you can, scream to the top of your lungs, hallelujah, Dr. Carter is here. Also, if you would like to continue to support the work that we're doing on this podcast, continue to support the way in which we're trying to deliver high value, high quality podcasts, you can support our work by becoming a member of our Patreon family. If you would just subscribe to our Patreon for just $5 per month, you get behind the scenes access to the recording of our podcast. You get increased engagement from me. You get support, Zoom calls. And I think that's a great value for $5 per month. So if you're interested, you can go to patreon.com/Dr. Hernando Carter, Dr. Hernando Carter, all one word, and subscribe. Also, if you have a business or if you have an event or if you just want to support one of our episodes and become an episode supporter or an episode sponsor, you can email us at contact@rxforbetterliving.org. That's contact@rx4betterliving.org. So, episode 24. I know you're wondering what we're going to talk about because over the last several weeks, we've talked about the reasons why our community mistrusts the medical industrial complex. But I hope you also got from our last episode how things have improved, how safeguards have been put in place really on the backs of Henrietta Lacks and the gentlemen and families who were in the Tuskegee study and the Mothers of Gynecology, how we have evolved as the medical industrial complex to have these safeguards in place that you can know there are checks and balances. There are independent individuals who are watching clinical trials, who are watching researchers, clinicians, and scientists to make sure that we're doing things in an ethical and transparent way. We also talked about informed consent and how informed consent protects you. And then we kind of put a bow on it and said that we need more people in the Black community to participate in clinical trials so that we can have accurate science that actually reflects what the makeup of our country is. But also, we talked about there's actually benefits to being in clinical trials, and that individuals who participate in clinical trials tend to have better outcomes. They have lower cost of health care. They have all these other benefits. So check out those last few episodes if you want to learn more. And I hope you do want to learn more. So today, we're going to talk about Superfund sites. Have you ever heard of a Superfund site? Well, if you are maybe a public health nerd you have, or if you're very interested in environmental justice you have. But if you are an everyday working person who is really into your thing and your life, you've probably not heard of a Superfund site. Well, why is it important, Hernando, for us to talk about Superfund sites? I'm glad you asked. It's because, again, in this podcast, we're focusing on health disparities. How do we eradicate those? And how do we promote health equity? So, again, we have to define and identify the problem. So, when we talk about Superfund sites, that is really talking about environmental pollution, but not environmental pollution like you would think about the oceans, right? I'm talking in our communities where we live, eat, breathe, and sleep, environmental pollution. And these areas tend to be concentrated in urban communities. Now, if you are from Birmingham or if you in and around the Birmingham, Jefferson County area, then you know what some of these areas are. Think about where some of those plants are, like in Tarrant or in North Birmingham. Think about the proximity of those plants and those railways to communities and housing. And think about all of the emissions and think about all of the chemicals and all that stuff that they use to do the work in their plants. And you have to know that that stuff is going somewhere, right? So again, when we talked about kind of health disparities and why Black folks' health outcomes are so much worse, I posed a kind of a audacious question. It was kind of a ridiculous question, right? And it was, I mean, is it just bad luck to be Black? And then I said, no, of course not. But there have to be reasons why and connections to all of these worse outcomes, all of these higher cancer numbers and higher lung disease numbers and higher heart disease numbers. There has to be some connection somewhere, right? And so in medical school and in residency training, we learn this concept of Occam's razor, right? And in Occam's razor, what you're trying to do is find a common connection, right? And you're saying that all things being equal, there is an identifiable cause. There is a link between all of these things. Okay. Now, as I've said to you before, health disparities, it's a multifaceted thing, right? There's a lot of tentacles to the octopus. But when you boil it down, it's all about injustice, the lack of justice. And that's what Dr. King was all about. Dr. King was about confronting and combating injustice wherever it is, whether it was in the voting booth, whether it was in the classroom with separate but equal, whether it was with Jim Crow in the Jim Crow South. But you know, towards the end of Dr. King's life, he started shifting and he was combating economic injustice, right? And when he was assassinated in Memphis, he was there and he was there to help support those garbage workers who were striking. And so he had started looking at economic injustice. He had also started looking at just human rights. And he had a very unpopular stance on the Vietnam War. So same thing here. There are things that they seem that like they're not connected, but they really are. Okay. And so you say, well, what is the connection between black folks' health and environmental pollution or economic injustice? I'm glad you asked. If you live in an area that is, in extremely close proximity to a plant, and you see all day, every day, smoke billowing in the air, you have to know that gravity works on Earth, right? And so what goes up must come down. And what's in that smoke are particles, particulate matter that's falling from the sky onto the ground. And then when it goes up in the air, it can go out, fan out farther, and then it lands in your yard where you spend time with your family, where you barbecue, where your children play. You know, when I was a little boy, we didn't have, I'm sound old again, but especially when I was a lot younger, before you really had a lot of video games like Nintendo. Like we had like Atari, but we really spent a lot of our time outside playing, riding our bikes, and we loved like playing in dirt. You know, we used to dig holes up, and oh man, my grandma used to hate that, digging up holes in her yard. But could you imagine living near one of these plants and Superfund sites as a 8 or 7 or 6-year-old little boy, and you're digging up dirt, just playing, and it's got poisonous material in it? What do you think that does to that child's health? What do you think that does to their ability to focus and concentrate and to learn and to remember? How does that affect their behavior? So there is a connection, y'all. So Superfund sites, let's get into them. So Superfund sites are locations that are polluted with hazardous materials. And they're called Superfunds because this was a designation by our government via the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. It was given this name as a program established to address these areas with hazardous waste. So think about somewhere where a plant exists for decades and decades and decades and just giving off the byproducts of their industry, right? Whether they are a steel plant or whether they're a coal plant or what have you, power plant, those byproducts of whatever they make had to go somewhere. Sometimes it was unintentional, but sometimes it was intentional, y'all. Sometimes they knew they were putting this stuff in our water and in our soil. So in 1980, there was a law passed, and it was called the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act. It was environmental law, and it was authorized. The law authorized the United States Environmental Protection Agency to create a list of polluted locations that required a long-term response. And if you were to Google Superfund locations or Superfund sites, you would find that there are a lot of Superfund sites in our state of Alabama. Yep. Some in Jefferson County, some in Montgomery, some in more rural areas, but they're all over, y'all. But let's talk about Jefferson County. Jefferson County has what they deem the 35th Avenue Superfund site. And this was the federally designated Superfund site in Jefferson County. So where is the 35th Avenue Superfund site? Birmingham's North Birmingham area. So Collegeville, North Birmingham, um, Fairmont, Harriman Park, Superfund sites. Well, what's over there, y'all? You had used to be ABC Coke. You had Sipco, all those areas. Well, what did they find in the Superfund sites, y'all? What they found was lead in the soil, arsenic. You heard of arsenic poisoning and people using arsenic to poison people? Yeah, it was there. Benzopyrene or benzenes. This was stuff that the EPA found in our soils in neighborhoods in and around North Birmingham. Well, why is that important? Well, let's talk about the community impact. Let's talk about what lead does, y'all. Now, we've talked about lead some, but let's talk about lead. I know you've heard about the dangers of lead in paint with kids and what it can do for as far as kids' ability to learn, right? What it can do to kids' ability to have like memory and headaches and other neurological conditions. But let's talk about some of these things. Lead, long-term pollution, nervous system. Lead can damage the central and peripheral nervous system, lead to nerve disorders, problems with memory, problems with concentration. Lead can negatively impact your blood, cause blood problems and anemia, can lead to kidney damage and kidney failure, can lead to damage to the brain, can affect the heart and your circulatory system. Are y'all hearing a common thread, y'all? Aren't these things that disproportionately affect our people? Heart disease and kidney disease and memory issues and concentration issues. Your reproductive system can cause reproductive, what you use to reproduce, problems, having children, conceiving children, can affect your hearing and your speech, on and on and on. So that's lead. And you remember, they made us take lead out of paint, but it's all in the soil in and around Jefferson County. Arsenic. Y'all heard of arsenic now. You don't have to be a science scholar to know that arsenic is bad business, right? You heard of arsenic poisoning and stuff like that. But let's talk about what arsenic can do. It can lead to damage to your skin. It can lead to cancers. What kind of cancers, Hernando? Bladder, lung, skin, liver, prostate. Prostate cancer, yeah. Kidney cancer, common theme. Heart disease. Arsenic can cause damage to your heart muscle, lead to heart failure. Kidney damage. Blood issues, increase your risk of infections and fatigue, lung problems, diabetes, poor circulation. Now, if someone acutely poisons you with arsenic, like they give you a whole lot of it at once trying to kill you, then you get sick real quick, right? And you get nausea. That means you're sick at your stomach and you're throwing up, stomach pain, diarrhea, feel numb all over. But if it's just small amounts of exposure, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, then maybe you don't feel it all of a sudden. With time, with years though, you feel that. Benzene, cancerous, all kinds of cancer. Skin problems again. You know what? I'll give you a good example of what benzene is. Formaldehyde. You ever been around formaldehyde? Now, in medical school, we were around formaldehyde a lot because we had to dissect cadavers, dead bodies for anatomy to learn the human body. And those individuals who donated their bodies were embalmed with formaldehyde. Now, if you have a loved one to pass and they're embalmed and you go to the funeral, you probably won't smell that strong smell of formaldehyde. But if you embalm somebody and you cut their body open, you're going to smell that formaldehyde. And I'm going to tell you what formaldehyde did to us. It burned our noses, it burned our eyes, irritated our eyes watered, throats burned, etc. You smelled of it everywhere you went. So I smelled like formaldehyde and stunk the whole first year of medical school because we were doing gross anatomy, which is probably why it was hard for me to get a date. But I digress. Anyway, but respiratory irritation, eye irritation, nervous system effects can damage your sense of smell, taste, can affect your mood, make you apathetic, can cause lung damage, can cause cancers, especially leukemia, cancers of the nose, mouth, and throat, can damage your stomach. Well, why is that important? Coke, not Coke like the Coca-Cola, but like ABC Coke, where they are using heat to distill down coal and oil. They're called Coke plants. Well, Coke plants were releasing smoke filled with benzenes, formaldehyde, all in the environment, y'all. So these people were breathing it. And again, if you think about something going up in the air and like a mushroom cloud, and then what does it do? It spreads around the environment, and then gravity, what goes up must come down. And it's landing in the soil, it's landing on the plants, it's landing in the water supply. It's in the air, you're breathing it in. So these are Superfund sites. So in 2020, we had 12 Superfund sites in Alabama that were identified. And there were millions of dollars allocated to clean this stuff up. They had to dig up that soil, take all that contaminated stuff out, plants and trees and all that stuff, and replace it. And I'm going to tell you where the injustice is, y'all. The injustice is that these industries knew that this stuff was poisonous. They knew what they were releasing into our environments and into our communities. We worked at these plants. We worked at these places. And so we lived close and around, right? They built communities around it. And they knew it. They knew this stuff was poisoning us. And they hid it. So not to get political with you, but this is why we need a federal government. And this is why we need agencies like the EPA, because we cannot trust industry to do what's right for us or what's in the best interest of people. Business is going to do what's in the best interest of business. Business is going to do what's good for the bottom line of business. And they'll take whatever shortcuts they can. They'll lie if they have to. Think about cigarettes. Think about how many people are addicted to nicotine now. But think about before we had all the science on cigarettes and what they did. They put packs of cigarettes in the packs of soldiers who were going to fight wars, got people addicted. They put it in vending machines. You can just put your quarters in and get the cigarettes. They glorified it in movies and magazines. I remember when I was a little boy, you could go to the candy lady and buy a box of those candy cigarettes, like the hard candy. And when you pulled it out and you puffed on the cigarette candy, a plume of smoke came out. I mean, they were conditioning us. And they knew cigarette smoking caused cancer. They knew it. Same thing with this. It was worse, though, because our economy and our country runs on these things. Let's talk about some of the companies that were involved. So we talked about ABC Coke, and they've changed names over and over and over. And now Coke plants are still in existence now. I mean, they're up and running. They shut down for a little while, but you still have Coke, COKE plants. Yeah, still here in Jefferson County, in Birmingham. They are much more heavily regulated now. Yep. ABC Coke was one of the plants. We talked about that. Drummond, you know that name. Drummond were complicit in releasing these toxins into our environment. U.S. Pipe in North Birmingham, U.S. Pipe was complicit. And so millions and millions of dollars by the federal government, and then these industries had to repay that money to clean this stuff up. There were some champions in our government. Maxine Parker, I think Maxine is passed on now, but Maxine Parker was a champion of making sure that this story of Superfund sites was well publicized. And you can go, there was an article in AL.com. You can go find this article from 2017 about Superfund sites. And you'll hear a little bit more. You'll read a little bit more. There were some villains too. Some villains who were supposed to be representing us, who sold us out for money from industry so that these companies could be protected. So again, what have we been talking about on this podcast? We've been talking about higher rates of diabetes, higher rates of heart disease, higher rates of cancer, prostate cancer, kidney cancer, higher rates of kidney failure and kidney disease. We've talked about all these things in this podcast. Higher rates of cardiovascular disease. Now, this is just Alabama, but there are Superfund sites all over this country. And you know what they have in common? Most of those Superfund sites are in places with high concentrations of people that look like me. So again, what does injustice have to do with health care and health disparities? I hope you've seen the common trend. In that we have to be engaged, y'all. We got to be aware. We got to be engaged in our neighborhoods and our communities. We got to be civically engaged, because I tell you what, if the people in the communities had not have been kicking up fuss saying, hey, these plants around here are making us sick, and they kept going till they voted somebody in who was going to listen to them. Maxine Parker listened. Terry Sewell listened. But if you don't show up, and if you don't hold these people accountable, if you don't vote, and if you don't keep being the squeaky wheel, they will let you keep being the victim and let you keep dying, generation after generation. But not the viewers of this podcast, because you are informed and you are aware. So, this has been another episode of the Prescription for Better Living podcast. Again, I am Dr. Hernando Carter, your board-certified internal medicine physician. Yep, primary care extraordinaire, saying, wherever you go, wherever you are, scream from the highest mountaintop, hallelujah, Dr. Carter is here. Until next time, Dr. Carter saying, peace out.